Hello everybody, thank you for joining me again for some comic talk. On a previous video I asked for suggestions on things to talk about. Thank you to everyone who responded, such as Alvesh129, if that is your real name. A great video might be the whole manga versus comic debate, your 2 cents and some thoughts on how their industries are doing and what they can learn from each other. Fantastic question, let's dive into it. Whew, okay, so, it's been a hot one. In the UK, it's been really hot this week. It's went up to about 25 degrees. Not sure what that is in Fahrenheit, but it was warm for me. And listen, I know there's going to be people in Texas or something saying, listen, mate, that's not hot, or listen, partner, that ain't no heat, or something like that. I don't care. It's hot. We're British. We can't deal with it. So, it's cooled down a bit now. Thank goodness for that. Let's get into Alvesh129's very good question about the whole manga versus comics thing. Interesting one, this. Depending on where you look now, over the last year's data, 2023 certainly, manga had come up to about 50% of the market. According to, this is from Publishers Weekly, an article published in 2024. According to a recent report from The Beat based on BookScan data, so it's fourth-hand information, but reported from a reputable source, of the 44.7 million graphic novels sold in 2023, nearly 21.8 million were manga, which is pretty much 49%, so there you go, half. And if you look around, you can find skews on that data. You can find data which is much higher than that. I've seen as high as 65, I think, percent of graphic novels sold were manga, which is vast, obviously. And I suppose in the question, it begs the question, is there a versus element? And let's dig into that. Anecdotally, working and owning a comic shop, I think I sell personally more graphic, in fact I know I sell more graphic novels than manga. But that's typical, and there are anomalies in the week. Sometimes there'll be a day where it's just manga heavy, and it obviously depends on the crowd who comes in. It is true that the manga buyers tend to be younger, in my experience. But that's not to say younger people don't buy graphic novels. Conversely though, more mature people, perhaps people in my age range or older, buy graphic novels, but they don't tend to also buy manga. So it feels like the younger crowd is open to everything, whereas the older crowd, like me, are perhaps predictably more stuck in their ways, and they like what they like. And it's not so much that I'd like to think, they don't dislike manga, it's just, it's not being part of the culture of comics when they were growing up. And so now it's outside of their sort of realm of interest and expertise. And I don't want to make it sound like they are scared of something new. I don't think that's the case. It's just, obviously everyone's got a limited budget, they've got a limited time. And if they have a pre-existing sort of thread of interest in their life, Spider-Man, then when the next Spider-Man thing comes out, they're much more likely to go, oh, the new Spider-Man thing is here, rather than, oh, and I'm going to try this entirely new thing, which is not just a new set of characters and a new story, but culturally different. Sometimes storytelling techniques are different. It's a fundamentally different art form, very much related to comics, and of course it is comics, but it's sufficiently different that someone who has a very clear idea in their mind of what they like, manga can be different enough for them to be put off by that. Manga then, it's a juggernaut now, isn't it? And it must be said, and it's often said, it's almost a cliche to say this now, but the culture in Japan of comics is much more open than certainly here in the UK, and I believe in America, for example, as well, so in the West generally. Now, I think that is changing. I think comics are far more accepted in the West now than they would have been Yes, this is a niche shop, this is a comic shop, but that's not as niche as it used to be. Certainly it's more culturally understood here now. But nonetheless, Japan has a long history of comic art, sequential storytelling, as all cultures do, but it entered into their popular mainstream culture. I used to live in Japan for a few years, and you would more readily see people enjoying that form of entertainment on a train, on a bus. You would see them much more readily available at effectively a newsstand. At train stations, for instance, they would have a big stack of the latest manga magazines, and people would buy them like hotcakes. They're more disposable too. They seemed, some of them anyway, more disposable too. They were very much more like a magazine than a keepsake book. And I suppose, I mean, again, go back to the culture thing. They are different. Obviously, the flow of the pages is reversed to our Western standard. And there's very dramatic storytelling. Now, obviously, all comics are dramatic storytelling. By definition, they are taking moments in time and putting them in sequence, sequential storytelling. And so you're getting these dramatic key moments of a timeline. But manga is then very, very expressive, and they use a lot of shortcuts, don't they? A lot of the speed lines and things, and a lot of expressions on the faces are sort of cultural shortcuts to what is going on in a character's mind, which I think sometimes takes a bit of getting used to. This may not be fair to say. I feel like manga is more open to more diverse storytelling. They've got obviously loads of horror, they've got the action, they've got their superhero stuff, they've got romance stuff, they've got very quiet slice of life stories. Now, graphic novels and comics do as well, it's true, but to a much lesser degree. And I think that just goes, again, to show what we talked about a while ago, that manga is a more accepted part of the culture there. It's, by being less niche, it is more diverse. So, for example, in the olden days of British TV, where we had 3 channels, there was only so much airspace to airwaves to fill up, and they didn't even operate 24 hours. So there was only so much time. So in that time, you were going to get big hitter things, your EastEnders, game shows, the news. But now there's, I don't know, 200 channels. And so you're able to get something a bit more niche, like Bike Restoration Club or things like that. I'm clutching at straws, maybe that's not the best parallel, but the point I'm making is that as soon as more content is allowed in, it's naturally going to become more diverse. And because manga is such a more mainstream part of the Japanese culture and is hence more diverse, they're able to tell a broader range of stories more readily. And so it becomes less niche. It becomes less, oh, comics are for kids, or comics are all superheroes. And it becomes, comics are a form of storytelling, no different, better or worse than television, movies, or anything else. Novels, of course. There's actually, novels is a far better example. Anyway, you ask Alvesh129 what the two can learn from each other. And I think the sad truth is, and I'd like everyone's thoughts on this, I think comics could learn a lot from manga. I don't know what we're going to be, comics are going to be teaching manga. Manga have been at it quite happily for a very long time. They've got it nailed. I think there may be something to be said for kind of the inherent insular nature of a country like Japan. That's not to say they're insular per se, but they are the only country that speaks Japanese, Japan. And so their culture and their entertainment has been refined and perfected within their own culture. And so they've really nailed it. And it is really down to what it is. What are we going to tell them? You need to make it more complicated and have 15 crossovers. I don't think they need that advice. What could we learn? Let's look at where we're at with manga now. Manga tends to be sold in sequential volumes. I mean, sometimes there's a vast number of them, as you may know, but it goes from number 1 to number 100. So if you're interested in One Piece, in Death Note, in whatever, you know where to start. It's volume 1. It's pretty simple. And they stay the course, and they tell their story through the number of volumes required to tell their story. Comics don't do that. If someone comes in interested in beginning with Batman, there's 1,000 jumping on points. You could argue that's better. There's 1,000 jumping on points for Batman. Yes, that you could argue that's more opportunity to jump on, but I'd argue it's actually far, far, far more confusing. A reader will come in expected to already have so much knowledge now of that world. And that's confusing for someone new. It can be exciting too, of course. But manga makes it so much easier to become a fan of manga. So what are we going to teach them there? I think things like the Ultimate line for Marvel, the Absolute line for DC, obviously, serve that purpose really, really well, where they're an entirely new world and it's a number 1. So you could argue that that's a lesson learned. I mean, comics have been doing that for years. It's not like they've reinvented the wheel, but it does at least put that line of product on a similar footing to where manga is, where someone can walk into a shop and now knows what to do. So listen, I mean, the whole manga versus comic debate, I wonder if it is a debate. I mean, yes, of course it is a debate, but I wonder if it's actually got any basis at all. They're different. They're different enough to stand on their own 2 feet. They're similar enough that we should all be open to both of them. Getting preachy now, and I don't mean to, but I feel that we're sort of at that crossroads where manga is now. I mean, obviously, the amount of manga which has become television shows and so on, is huge, and that's bringing people in, and which actually relates to another question Alvesh asks, which I'll address as a separate video. But hey, like what you like, yeah, as always. Get in the shade. No matter what you like, go find some. Get into the shade. Get reading and just enjoy it. But just be open to other things, I suppose. Anecdotally, I should say, I completely sort of just skirted around it, just talking. Me and manga, my thoughts on manga is I now really like it, but I was resistant to it for quite some time. Even when I was living in Japan, I hunted out other things. I mean, yes, there was a language barrier, of course, but I could have got English translations, but I didn't. If I could get an English translation of something, I'd go for something I was familiar with anyway. Partly because I was missing my fix of those things, partly because they were very expensive anyway. So if you're going to spend that money on something, you want to make sure it's something you want. But in more recent years, I've really, really got into it. I love something called Cat Gamer. Wrong way, you see. It's wrong to call this a guilty pleasure. It's not a guilty pleasure by any means. I'm comfortable and happy and proud to be loving some Cat Gamer. And is that a good example of manga? I don't know. I think it probably is. The Junji Ito stuff is fantastic. There's these big, solid tomes with a complete story in, and they're just beautiful. He did this thing called Cat Diary, Cat Diary, which is like he adopts 2 cats and doesn't know what he's doing. And it's like this weird kind of horror story about what he imagines these cats are doing when they're just cats. There is obviously so much manga, and from my point of view as a retailer, it's tricky because do I get all 150 whatever volumes of Naruto? Probably not. I haven't got space. Certainly don't have space. Do I get 1 to 10 then? Or do I get 1 to 5 and then the most recent 5? How do you win that? Someone's going to come in saying, have you got volume 73? And I'm like, no. That's tricky. That's one of the downsides of manga, is it is so voluminous. It goes on for so long. I don't know how anyone stays in stock of these things or satisfies that demand actively. It's actually really, really difficult. Obviously, you can order it in; it's fine. But that's a trick. That's a trick with manga. So I instantly want to gravitate towards stocking things like Cat Gamer or Junji Ito stuff, one and dones. Own 6 volumes, like 7 volumes now of Cat Gamer, I think, and things where I've at least got a chance of covering that scope of product. I don't think I've got anything more to say on it. I love the question though, and I thank you for asking the question. And I'd like everyone to ask anything they want. I like doing these videos. I find it fun. I like just sitting here sort of talking like I know it all, which I certainly don't. So if I fluffed, which I may well have done, please tell me that in the comments below. Hey, thank you again for watching this video. Please like and subscribe. Please join me again. Please ask any questions. You can also email me, should you want to, which is andy@secretidentitycomics.com. You can leave a question below. You can follow Instagram, which is Secret Identity Comics. You can ask questions there. And yeah, great. Thank you very much indeed, and I'll talk to you again.